Beyond the Pelvis is hosted by Dr. Keneal Siegel, a pelvic floor PT and intuitive healer, and Laura Haraka, a somatic practitioner and breathwork facilitator. Each week, we explore alternative and holistic approaches to healing chronic pelvic pain and other painful or chronic conditions. Join us and other experts in mind, body, and spiritual healing as we discuss a wealth of modalities ranging from ancient practices to modern therapies that challenge the conventional Western model of treatment. Let's get right to it.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Beyond the Pelvis. Today, we were honored to have Janet Livingstone with us. Janet is a world traveler with a career in leadership training, curriculum development, and facilitation. Realizing that leaders and everyone else function from the inside out and can benefit from emotional support, she began studying psychedelics and internal family systems. She currently practices the two streams of her career in parallel, and often one informs the other. So welcome, Janet, to the podcast.
Thank you. It's really nice to be here.
We're excited to have Janet on. One, because we completed our psychedelic training together, and also you have experience with pelvic pain, and we really wanted to speak to you about that.
Yeah, we have a lot to talk about. We really do.
So I'm wondering if you can just share a little bit about yourself and who you are today.
Oh, goodness, where to begin? Yeah, so I've had a full and kind of interesting life, I guess, with plenty of ups and downs. I come from the East Coast, but studied international relations and ended up living in Europe for a really long time in former Czechoslovakia, also during the revolution. So I've seen a lot of interesting stuff over there. And then I moved back from Europe straight to Seattle, where I'm now based. And so culture shock is one of my specialties from lived experience and just also intellectually. And while I was living in Slovakia, I would go out often with my girlfriends and we would just have coffee. And then I would get home and like a couple hours later, I'd start getting text messages like, "Oh, you helped me so much. Oh my God, I feel so much better." And I was like, "What are you talking about? All I did was drink my cappuccino." And I slowly began to understand that they were somehow getting something out of our talk sessions, that they were experiencing that as therapeutic somehow, or healing. And then that was the first time it dawned on me that maybe I should, turn this into a professional skill. So I got certified as a coach in 2014. And so I've been coaching since then and doing one-on-one work as a coach, whether it's an entrepreneur or a leader, a mid-level, senior level, doesn't matter. It is really one of the most gratifying things that I do, to listen to somebody, to hold space for them, to watch them have insights and to have their trust. And it just feels really perfect and natural. It's gratifying for me. It helps them. So that has grown and it's become a part of a career that's kind of a big, messy whole. So leadership development, which consists of standing in a classroom and facilitating discussions or delivering content, and executive coaching, and now looking at psychedelics and IFS therapy as things that I can incorporate into coaching, right? We know Keneal and I have had so many, lectures, so much content on how psychedelics really helps people heal, get over their anxiety, depression, PTSD, whatever it is that people deal with on an everyday basis. And I'm building my business to provide psychedelic facilitation to, in a way that's legal and to also work in IFS therapy, which is so, so powerful. And yeah, that's all I'll say for the moment. You
Mhm.
can, yeah, let me know what else you want to know about. That's
Yeah,
who I am
I
now,
find
a
that
messy
I fi
combo.
yeah, I find that people often end up where they need to be based on their own history with that. So, what was it that led
Yeah,
you to psychedelics and or IFF?
yeah. Okay. So, I grew up in a household with a psychiatrist parent. And so that mindset was present in our family from day zero for me. The kind of mindset of that person's behaving this way, why? What, why are they doing that? What's behind it? What's going on with them? Um, that was the upside. The downside was being the first child of a psychiatrist, so I was often the subject of observation. It's like some of the traumatic uh, childhood memories are of dinner parties where I was put on display. Like, here she is, look at her, isn't she great? Oh, look what she's wearing. Oh, can you play the piano for us, darling? It's kind of like you are performing, you are a thing to be looked at. And that was super hard. I was self-conscious for decades. I had trouble functioning in groups for a really long time. And so for me, this is a culmination of a long, long discovery of my own identity in the face of a family that was, pretty full of anxiety, some like legacy Jewish trauma for sure, um, and healing that stuff. And psychedelics came up for me maybe 3 years ago. I met a fellow leadership development person who had become really, really interested in it. And when I started to read, when I listened to her and when I started to read and found that other people were also talking about it, I thought, okay, yeah, this might be really, really interesting because it's not only about talk therapy, it's about something, you know, plant medicine that can be really powerful and it's growing in popularity and it's new but not new. I also felt personally ready. I was really anxious as a younger person, but I did smoke weed in college, like so many people. But I felt ready. I felt open enough to start trying stuff. So, to take psilocybin mushrooms or try cannabis in a new form or whatever. I still have lots to explore. But it's been a lifetime journey to get here. And what's so beautiful about it is to feel a kind of ownership of my new identity somehow as a healer. And I'm still a
Mm,
little bit embarrassed to say that, to be honest, because it's new.
yes, I
But
understand that.
right? Yeah. Um, but it's like I've been through this a little bit before. So 12 years ago, I was in the theater, I was in amateur theater, and I worked with this insane director. He was bananas and brilliant. And I would always be like, yeah, I'm just here. Everyone else is an actor. And he'd say, Janet, you are an actor. You are an actor. Why don't you say that? And he kept pushing me. And it took me like a year and a half. And I finally said it. So I'm taking ownership of this. And to the point of this podcast, right? The topic, I've had some help with my physical stuff, with my somatic life from psychedelics, like very noticeably.
So I'm just curious, can you talk a little bit about some of the things that it's helped you with?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I've had a problem with my sacroiliac joint on the right side for like since I was kind of 12-ish. I had a gymnastics accident. I fell off the uneven parallel bars. And I was diagnosed with sacroiliac dysfunction, which really doesn't mean much. but it would bother me. It would click when I walked, and it would bother me if I sat in certain positions for too long. But I didn't have pain until later in life. And so I would have like pain on one side, not excruciating, but it would interfere with my, enjoyment and my movement in life. And it started getting worse. And I started to feel like this is a chronic thing, that I'm never going to get rid of it, that it's going to get worse. It started to generate a lot of fear in me. And that was horrible. And I'm not a fan of, operations or anything like that. And I didn't want to be, glued to a physical therapist I did not want to be on medication for any longer period. Otherwise I'm healthy, knock on wood. And I began to realize after, so a couple things happened. First of all, we went on a retreat in Pennsylvania. Keneal, you were there. And during the breath work, I had some real psychedelic, experiences. I had visions and stuff that happened. And then afterwards, we were offered body work by a couple of the facilitators, two men. And the experience of having them help me open up my back while I was pulling on them, and of having them support me and be healing, be men who are with me, who are healing me, and who are not, trying to make me into something else, or ignoring me, or being threatening, or whatever it was a revelation for me. And they finished, and I sat up, and my back felt like it did 20 years earlier. And it didn't last, but I felt it. So I knew that it was possible. So that was an incredible moment.
That's so interesting. Can I just point out that,
Yeah.
when you said it was your right sacral iliac joint, I'm a physical therapist, and of course I'm thinking PT lens, but I'm also thinking energetic and the right side, because you mentioned it several times, right side, not just sacral iliac joint or SI joint. You kept saying right side, right side. That's masculine.
Yep.
That is dysfunction on the masculine side of the body. So it's not surprising to me that you felt that brief healing when two men supported you, because that was, I'm just reading into it, but that, I'm guessing, is what started the dysfunction in the first place. It was related to a masculine, yeah. You can go into that if you want to, but that's what I noticed.
Yeah, I'm getting some mini goosebump action over here listening to you. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Yes. So first of all, I am right-handed and right-sided. So I'm oriented that way anyway. But I've spent most of my life literally leaning forward, both physically and literally, trying to anticipate what someone else needs, worrying about how to please everybody else, right? The people pleaser is very, very dominant. And the rejection of, like, every time I wanted to be myself, or I needed something for me, or I had a stronger emotion, there would be some shame coming from a parent, right? Where you get off being so angry, right? And so the people pleaser is really a fundamental survival mechanism for me from childhood. And as I got older, the pitching forward, literally like walking bent forward, and the posture just totally exacerbated whatever was happening physiologically. This is my interpretation. I can't wait to hear your next comment, Keneal. That just made it worse. And it started to feel chronic. And I was holding a ton of anxiety and tension in my abdomen. And that whole combo just made for dysfunctional stuff and root chakra. I don't even know, but I found that having the men help me heal. And then later, a couple months later, being somewhere else and finding a man, Rolfer, who also really helped me. But it just added to that sense of relief. And the concurrent work with an IFS therapist to unload the emotional emotional burdens of the parts has just opened me up. And I now can walk down the street and consciously adjust my posture to a place where I can feel really good intentionally, which is a revelation.
So amazing. What you've been saying has hit home for me as someone who's dealt with chronic pain. One of the things that I did a long time, I don't do it as much now anymore. I'm very conscious of it, right? And was the leaning forward and leaning in. And my pain was also on my right side.
Wow.
So we have a
Okay.
lot of things in common. So a lot of, it struck a chord with me, all the things you've said.
Yeah, I don't think that's a coincidence because yeah, that's how it
Yeah.
shows up. And you mentioned a couple of things, right? We talk about emotions, like people not feeling safe enough to express emotions, and then it gets stored in the body because it is not safe. And the body says, I'll hold on to that for you.
Yeah.
But you mentioned like people pleaser because
Yes.
you wanted to make everyone else feel okay, right? Like that was how you felt you could be safe was being able to read people so that
Yep.
you can do what made them safe and comfortable, which would in turn keep you safe. So you mentioned sh being shamed, and then that led you to being a
Yeah.
people pleaser. That comes up so much when we talk to people about, these TMS symptoms is like people pleasing
Yeah.
and holding on to emotions. And you said it, you were shamed
Yeah.
and you held on to that.
Yeah. It was, being a people pleaser was the only way for me to feel loved as a kid.
Mm.
And it often backfired. Like with the little mean girl friends you have when you're like in second grade, right? And you try to like be really, really, really nice and they reject you anyway because they're busy, they have a different agenda. And those repeated injuries are pretty impactful. But something else is coming up for me. That I'd like to add here, and that is that when I became an IFS client, I met a bunch of my parts. Can I talk about IFS just
Absolutely. Talk about
without
IFS. Why don't you?
explaining? Yeah,
Yeah,
so
explain what that is.
should I explain what IFS is first? Okay, that's
Sure.
that's my question. So IFS stands for Internal Family Systems, and it's a methodology for psychotherapy that is based on the Jungian tradition of multiplicity of self and the psyche. And the main tenet is basically that every person has parts inside that play different roles, that we're not one mind, we're not some, block of just I am me and today I have this mood and tomorrow I might have a different mood, but that there are parts inside us that help us survive. For example, based on my childhood stuff, when I come up against a person, it doesn't have to be a man, it's worse if it's a man. But if I come on a person who interrupts me constantly or who doesn't acknowledge me, doesn't hear me, I get upset. I get really triggered. And that upset usually comes out as a pushback. Sometimes I'm angry, sometimes I'm can be rude. It's better now, and that kind of a part is called a protector. And there are different levels of protectors. Some are just like managers, like, no, you can't do that. You should be doing this now, and remember this, and blah blah. Like it's like my little girl with glasses and a clipboard. And then the more vigorous ones are firefighters. So we have different parts, and there are other parts too. There's the exile, the very, very vulnerable parts that are exiled too deeper in the psyche because they're so vulnerable that the protectors really, really have to work hard to keep them from harm. And so I've met all those kinds of parts in my IFS therapy. And here's my point, the connection between my back pain and IFS. So during one of my sessions, kind of 3 or 4 sessions in, I saw a woman apart who was an older woman bent over almost 90 degrees, plodding along. I could only see her from the back, plodding along slowly with her arms clasped behind her back, almost as if she were carrying the burden, like the big burden. And I watched her, and the therapist will instruct you to try to make contact. And I tried to let her know that I saw her, and she turned her head a little bit and kind of barely acknowledged me. And the more I followed her and watched her, the more I realized that she was really, really old. That in fact, I think that she is an ancestral kind of a legacy part, right? I mentioned before the Jewish trauma, so I come from a Jewish family. And what was also really incredible was that while I was witnessing her, I had flashbacks of violence that did not belong to me, right? For all my emotional trauma, whatever, I'm not a victim of physical violence. I'm very lucky. I've never been. But this woman, this part, or somebody in my background was probably a victim of a pogrom or some kind of violence. And I literally had flashbacks. So all of this is connected, right? And the fact this woman is bent over, I found to
Like
be
you were
really
leaning
significant.
forward. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
For people
yep,
who don't believe things like this, like, I mean, I'm sure by now listening to our podcast, people kind of buy into certain things
oh
now
no,
at this point, right? But for you to
yeah,
have seen this older woman and to have this knowing that that's not me, that was something you inherited, and aware that that was generational, that's not unusual, even from a scientific lens, because that's what we call epigenetic markers, right? They've done studies with
yes,
mice where they introduce them to a certain smell and they know that that smell means danger. And generations later, the offspring have never encountered the thing, like the smell, but they will encounter the smell for the first time and respond with fear, never having experienced it before, because that gets passed down. So it's just so interesting that you were able to literally visualize and try to make contact with the marker that was passed down to you epigenetically.
And I'm just so it's
yeah,
so interesting. This woman was bent forward. It's like,
Right,
and you're carrying this burden
right.
of your
yeah,
ancestors.
yeah. It's like this weird literal corresponding feature, like
Mhm.
carrying the pain. And yeah, Kenil, I thanks for bringing the science in. It is real.
It is real.
And
Yeah.
it's one of those things where if we open our eyes to it, suddenly we can see it everywhere, right? People come to this world, they're born carrying all kinds of stuff. And it really helps to know. It helps to relieve us and heal us personally. It helps for the people who love us to understand us better and to have more compassion for us. I mean, I wish my ex-husband would do some digging into his own stuff because, he's worthy of compassion. He suffered a lot in childhood. It took me years post-divorce to like understand more about him. And with the help of psychedelics, I started to feel compassion for him for the first time.
Mm,
Yeah.
beautiful. So tell us what happened with your SI joint pain since that experience. How did it change your pain and or even the
Yeah.
psychedelics? Like how did all of that change your pain?
Well, it provided like incredible relief at moments. I don't have consistent relief all the time because there is a piece of it that's a product of my habitual daily life, right? So I do also need to change my lifestyle, but it allowed me to feel incredible relief, especially the psychedelics. So when I do a psilocybin journey, one of the first effects I have is somatic. It's a very somatic experience for me always. The second strongest part of the psychedelic journey is visual for me. But what I have found is that my body, when I take psilocybin at a journeying dose, my body is freed completely. I am free of pain. I am flexible. And what happens is that I start moving and I can't stop moving while I'm journeying. It's very interesting. So my whole body just kind of does the wave for a long time. And then in the afterglow, I also feel absolutely perfect. No pain, no problem moving. I can dance the way I used to. I used to dance a lot. And so what that has brought to me is the understanding that it's possible for me to be absolutely okay and pain free. And that hope and that optimism, that knowledge is hugely helpful. So now I know I need to be active. I can't be sitting in front of the computer for, hours at a time. And I should not be even leaning into Zoom, which I do, right,
Mhm.
habitually.
So basically, the journey has given you messages that your body needs to move. Is that correct, what I'm hearing?
It's yeah, it's that. It's also so the last significant journey I had was like definitely the divine feminine, like 1,000%. I saw goddesses. I saw one from one culture morphing into another culture, morphing into a third one, morphing into a fourth one, and then I was one of them. And so the goddesses move, right? They do all this beautiful stuff. They dance, they embody sexuality. They like, so I also experience a kind of renewal of my sexual identity, which is gorgeous, right? Like I'm older, I'm not very active. Maybe this is TMI, but it's just fabulous to experience that. So it's like a renewal of a piece of my identity as well. It's yeah,
I'm I'm so curious because, people that listen to our podcast have, chronic pain, or most of them,
yeah,
I think that's who listen. And during these journeys, you said that your pain, goes away.
yep,
Is this something that will return quickly? Is it something like if you have chronic pain, like what the protocol would be? Like, is this something you have to do every couple of weeks? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
yeah. Um, my best way to avoid pain is really all about lifestyle and daily habits. I sleep only on my sides. The scoliosis is such that sleeping on my back is no longer comfortable and it hits me in the sacroiliac. Um, that actually could get better, and it did when I did had the body work at the retreat. But so sufficient sleep and sleeping in the right position, um, being active really on a daily basis, at least walking. Walking is absolutely fantastic. Strength training has helped me a lot to keep my core feeling good, to keep my upper back muscles active and strongish. I have my son is a rower, and we have a rowing machine in the garage, which is wonderful. You would think, oh, sitting down and pulling on something wouldn't be good for your sacroiliac. No, for me, it engages the core and the quads and the lats and everything so fully that it's just beautiful. It's really useful. And then the emotional piece, really, really taking the time and being intentional about keeping my mood, keeping up my self-confidence and my emotional state, keeping it healthy, keeping it positive. And the way I do that is to engage in the activities where I feel that I'm helping others and having an impact. Also, being more selective about who I spend time with, because, not everyone is an energetic match, right? But there are plenty of people who would take a piece of your time gladly. So setting boundaries is super important. And this whole process has helped me feel entitled to set boundaries, right? That's another piece. So it's really a combination.
Yeah, so psychedelics is just a piece of the puzzle, is what I'm kind of hearing.
Yeah, psychedelics is a piece of the puzzle. I have yet to get into microdosing, so that's, stay tuned. That could be another piece. Go ahead.
The things that you mentioned, the lifestyle changes, was it the combination of psychedelics and IFS that allowed you to see not just the trauma, but also the lifestyle changes, the things that you were or were not doing that were not helpful, and how you can change those to be more beneficial to keep you pain free?
Yeah, psychedelics and IFS have been a huge piece of it. Not the whole, but a huge piece. They basically helped me shift my own mindset in terms of how much power I have over my own well-being. That's been hugely important. Another piece that I didn't mention is that psychedelics have helped my anxiety decrease by, a good 60%. I mean, like a huge difference.
Wow.
Yeah, so that experiencing feeling better, even if it's temporary,
Right.
just brings so much hope and optimism, especially when it's done in a safe environment, in a group, for example, where there are people you feel safe with and you trust who are around. We did a group of us did a friends retreat in Colorado where it's legal, where psilocybin is legal, and we had an incredibly powerful time because we all were there to look out for each other, and we journeyed in phases so that whenever someone was journeying, there was always at least one or two others who were not journeying, who were there to facilitate. Yeah, it's been a long road for me. I would say that my real transformation started with divorce. So getting myself back, it was really a return to self, because my pattern was to become attached to narcissistic types. My ex-husband is now my friend, and I'm not here to trash him. He is quite an extraordinary person, but he had his own big deal, tough childhood. So it started with divorce. Then I had a really kind, compassionate male coach, and that was not intentional. It was just, he was there and the energy was right. And he stuck with me for 5 years after I moved here to Seattle. And then I started working, and my confidence grew through my professional environment. And then I got into psychedelics, and it's just a long process. It's the greater journey within which the psychedelics fits. And now I want to make the psychedelics and IFS a much bigger part of my life and what I can offer to clients. And now, after the last study thing that I did, now I understand fully the combination of how I can use IFS in psychedelic facilitation prep and integration.
I'm just curious, and I know I'm going back a little bit, but when was the first time you realized that there was an emotional component between your physical pain and your emotional pain?
Great question. I think I realized when I was doing that theater stuff that I mentioned before, I think I realized that there was something there at that time because the kind of theater we were doing was there was a lot of movement and it was pretty athletic. And I came in thinking, there's no way I can do this stuff. Like I'm the old lady here, everybody else is 25. You know, what are they thinking? Like how and it turns out that I could. I had this tightness in my body that was an accumulation of frustration and anger and anxiety over the years. And so having to be on stage was a kind of therapy because I grew up really self-conscious because I was put in that position as like the girl on display. But then when I was on stage in a play, like I was supposed to be there, right? I was entitled to be there. And it was okay for me to say my lines. On the contrary, I had to say my lines and I had to be there and I had to be fully there. And I had to be part of a group that I wasn't isolated. So it started then when I realized that my body was okay. But you know, it goes up and down because we carry, right? The protectors get activated and we carry stuff and we react and we get anxious and we get shamed and whatever happens. And it depends on what happened and how conscious we are as to how long it takes us to recover. And so I would say that my first psychedelic journey ever was another turning point, huge turning point, because the afterglow was so beautiful and my anxiety was just like flew out the window. I felt so incredibly good, like I hadn't felt in years. And then I saw it. Then I was like, okay, yeah, there's stuff going on in here. This stuff has value. So 15 years gradually.
And I just want to point out that, psychedelics has been really big for you. And I believe it can be for many people, but it doesn't have to be psilocybin, right? You mentioned the
Yeah.
healing that you had with the breathwork experience that we both took place in, and it actually reminded me that we were partnered together, but something ended up happening and we didn't
Right?
actually sit together, but we still were partnered together. But either way, I
Yeah.
mean, you did have significant healing from that experience, and that was just breath work. So that in itself can be a psychedelic experience. I mean, anything can be a psychedelic experience, but people listening to this who are new to this might automatically think, are these people trying to get me to do drugs or mushrooms? But it doesn't have to be.
Right. Absolutely not.
That,
I
right?
worked
Yeah.
in a drug rehab center for a while and I taught breath work there. And I remember one of the clients literally saying to me, Laura, what did you do to me? I feel I feel
Right.
high. I feel high, but I didn't take any drugs.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for pointing that out, Keneal. It is, you are absolutely right. It is so important to recognize that because it's real. Our bodies can produce, right? They can produce the same effect. And we all witnessed it at that retreat. There were, how many of us were there? Like 22?
It was like 20, yeah, 20 something.
Yeah, there were a lot of us there. And basically, maybe with one or two exceptions, we all had
Hmm.
real experiences. We had consciousness raising experiences. I remember one person who really stuck in my mind was a woman who's been doing this for a really long time, who's a therapist or a counselor. And she got up and she said, and she's experienced. She got up and she said, that was one of the most profound things I have ever been through. And she was on the verge of tears, and I just looked at her like, wow.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's really important for listeners to know that breathwork is so powerful and
Right.
legal and fabulous and accessible. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I was just wondering if there's any thoughts or main messages that you'd want to leave our listeners with that you think have made the most impact on your life or can influence others.
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, depending on your actual physiological condition, you really may not need to be in any pain at all. And I'm sure that's a point that gets made here on this podcast a lot. I've been through it, and it's such a relief to understand that. Second of all, in my earlier life, I went through conventional talk therapy a couple of times. I don't mean 2 sessions, I mean 2 sets, for a month at a time. And the IFS methodology feels way more powerful, far more quickly. And it's not scientifically evidence-based yet because there hasn't been a ton of research, but the effect that an IFS session has can be likened to the psychedelic experience. It is a consciousness raising experience. And so my message basically is, if you're in talk therapy and you've been in talk therapy for years, there are other things out there. If you're not feeling, or if someone isn't feeling as well as they think they should be after a longer therapy, there are other methodologies.
Thank you. And would you mind sharing where people can connect with you if they would like to follow up?
Absolutely. So my new business is called Janet's Planet, and and my new website is janet'splanet.co, but it's under construction. So you can find me. I am on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram under Livingstone Janet. LinkedIn is Janet Livingstone in Seattle. And you can reach me by email anytime at janet@cultureiskey.coach. That's one word, cultureiskey.coach, COACH. Oh, you'll find me. I have bandwidth. Anyone who's interested in exploring the juncture of IFS and psychedelic facilitation, or anyone who is looking for executive coaching from a person with a broader background than just straight ICF certified coaching, please get in touch.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you so much.
So nice to be with you guys. Thanks.
If you'd like to leave us a message or ask a question, please check the show notes with the link so you can reach us directly, or email us at beyondthepelvis@gmail.com.